Devashish Makhija, thank you for joining us today. My name is Prem Shashi, and this is Talking Films. So you have a bachelor's degree in economics, right? So what made you sort of develop an interest towards filmmaking? Like, was there a moment when you were like, I need to make, I need to make films. I have to make films. This is something that maybe I want to do for the rest of my life, right? What sort of, spurred that sort of moment that created that moment in you?
In fact, even with economics, I didn't know that I wanted to study economics. I didn't have economics in school. I don't know why I did economics in college. So I've been a very confused person ever since I was probably 6 years old. So even after I finished graduating in economics, I did my master's for a couple of weeks. Then I dropped that and I was a journalist for a couple of months. Then I dropped that and I joined advertising as a copywriter. In advertising, I became an art director. I started doing graphic design. Then I dropped that and I just kept trying all kinds of things. But I had not considered cinema because I was not a movie buff. Unlike a lot of people who come into cinema, I was not a movie buff. I'd rather be reading books and listening to music than watching a movie. But then I had a lot of my juniors from school who had gone on to study videography and filmmaking and design. And I'd keep hearing from them about this medium that allows you to do so much, that allows you to write, that allows you to work with the moving image, with music, with dance, with color. And all of these things were my passion. I used to dance, I was into music, I was a singer. So I got to know broadly, vaguely rather, that there was this one medium where I could bring all my passions together. That was the only reason I chose cinema. It's only when I came to Bombay and started trying to get work is when I started watching films to see what is it that I'm getting into. And slowly the medium started blowing my mind because there's so much you can do with this medium that other mediums don't, I mean, cannot allow, because this brings together all kinds of expression and you're only limited by your own imagination. You're not limited by the medium, really. So it just happened by accident. I really didn't plan it or
Right.
didn't intend it, and I was not passionate about the medium. It happened slowly.
Right. So did you have some sort of a plan, right? Did you because you started off making short films, right? So did you think like, okay, I'm going to make some short films and I'm going to sort of get a feel for what the industry is like, or did you actually just decide, okay, I'm going to make a feature film and see how that turns out?
Neither. You can't. Bombay is a very difficult city to survive as an artist because it's a financial capital of India. It's not really an artistic city. It befuddles me to date why the film industry is located in a city like Bombay and not, for example, a city like Delhi, which is a little more art oriented, although it is political oriented as well.
Right.
So no, I didn't have a plan. I came to Bombay not even knowing what this medium was like and what I'm getting into. You come to whether it's a job or, I mean, whether you've been hired for a job or you just come to explore a certain a way of life. You have a certain idea of a timeline in your head that 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, you'll make a film and you'll know what it's like, and you'll thereafter make chart a course for yourself. So I came to Bombay nearly 20 years ago thinking that how long will it take me to make a film? 2, 3, 4 years. So I came and I started. I didn't know that I'd have to assist filmmakers because we are also a disorganized industry compared to the American industry, which has a certain sense of organization, which has some semblance of a ladder. You know that you get in at a certain level, and after a certain time, you write a few films. 4 years, 6 years in, you might make an independent film that will premiere at Sundance. Then you'll get a studio offer. There is some idea of a roadmap. Bombay doesn't have that because we are not organized. I assisted on a couple of films, and then I thought I was ready. And when I thought I was ready was the beginning of 2006. And between 2006 and 2016, in those 10 years, I had 17 shared films. I had films I had written, found producers for that got greenlit. I attached actors to. Some got into pre-production and got shelved. One of them was 80% shot and got shelved in 2009. All kinds of
Wow.
things happened on all those films. And these were all feature films. I had never considered making a short. So after 17 short films and 10 years, I was at a strange crossroad where I thought that, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe there's something that I'm doing wrong. That's when I started making a lot of short films. Around 2015, there was a strange portal that opened up. By portal, I mean a cosmic portal, not like an online portal. It opened up in the cinema space in India, where suddenly there were short films being banged out on YouTube and going viral. Something shifted, and I'd never considered making short films, but I thought, here's 10 years of my life that I've got nothing to show for, and I've got
Right.
so many stories, and I've made contacts. I've got people who believe in me. I just pulled friends together. Like a DOP would come in with his own camera, actors came in for free, and I started banging out shots. I made 5 shots in 1 year. One of them was Taandav, and all of them went viral. And suddenly in 2015, I was being pipped as the short film king of India. And I didn't plan that. I was just trying to compensate for 10 years of 17 shared feature films. And those 5 short films sort of changed things for me. They led to the film Ajji, Ajji led to Bhonsle, Bhonsle led to Joram. So it was a reverse journey actually. I didn't plan it. I didn't expect that I'd take so many years to arrive at my first feature film that got made and got released. So I say this
Mhm.
often to a lot of my friends and my team that in 2003, when I landed at Dadar station, if I'd met a prophet and if he had told me that, your first feature film will release in 2017,
Right.
14 years from the date that you've come to Bombay, I would have caught the next train back. I wouldn't have hung around.
You have written and directed all your films, right? Be it
Oh,
short films or feature films, right?
yes. Yes.
So have you ever considered directing someone else's script?
I get asked this often. I get offers as well, but I'm primarily a writer. Down in my
Right.
core, I'm a writer. I even with a film, the film starts forming in my head and starts finding its voice and its rhythm and its personality and its tone in my writing. So if I'm not written it, I don't know how to direct it. Of course, there are enough directors out in the world who do that, but I also realized that all the filmmakers that I was drawn to, from Inaritu, who you mentioned, to a Kislowski, to Godard, to a lot of the masters, were pretty much their own writers. Even if they had other writers, they led the writing of the film. The film
Right.
really formed itself from the ground up from the writing. So I mean, I'd like to consider it, but I don't know if I'd be able to do it, and I don't know if I'd enjoy it. I'm not a filmmaker first. I'm a writer first.
Okay. Do you feel like it is a bigger challenge to sort of uh, direct someone else's um, sort of thinking and their vision, to sort of bring that vision into the screen?
No, I don't know if it's a bigger challenge. It's a technical job. It's like being a cinematographer or an actor or a sound designer or an editor. You're coming in on someone else's vision, and then you're
Right.
trying to bring it to life in a certain way. So, and I'm a storyteller. I have a lot of stories inside me. I've got 17 ready scripts that I don't know if I'll get to make in my lifetime, and I'm sitting on 140 story ideas. So I don't know if I'm interested in bringing someone else's idea to fruition. I'm more interested in
Right.
my own ideas. So being a storyteller. I don't know if I want to be a technical hand on a film.
Right. Right. Okay. The process of filmmaking is usually very hard. It's usually very challenging. There's a lot of people, time, money invested, in making a film, right? So it's like taking a puzzle and you're sort of trying to put all the pieces together and you hope that they fit, right?
Yeah.
But from your experience and in your opinion, which is sort of like the hardest sort of obstacles, hardest roadblock that a filmmaker has to overcome?
It's interesting you asked me that because every 2 years, my answer to this question has changed because you reach a different stage in your filmmaking career and you realize that what you thought was the greatest challenge in your last film is actually not. There's a bigger challenge that you're facing with this next film, which is slightly bigger in scale and has, more collateral and more risks and more people you need to handle. So
Right.
I finally found the answer to this question a few months ago in something that Guillermo del Toro, the director of Pan's
Yep.
Labyrinth and Hellboy and Shape of Water, In an interview, he said something very beautiful that summarizes something that all filmmakers across the world face, but we don't have the right words for it. He said a filmmaker, while being a very introverted and inward looking and contemplative and gentle and artistic and emotional creature, because we have to protect our story and our characters, and we need to feel. If we don't feel, we can't make our collaborators feel, and we can't make the audiences feel. Simultaneously, every second of our lives, while we are being this, we also have to be hard and brutal and manipulative and aggressive and almost warrior like to protect the vision of our film from interfering producers, actors who think I mean, they are the reason the film's gotten greenlit, and they have counter opinions to yours. All kinds of people who have fertile minds and have strong opinions, but you have a vision and you need to protect your vision. And you can't always confront them aggressively. Sometimes you have to be manipulative. You have to lie, you have to connive because you're trying to protect your film. So you have to be these two very different personalities all at once. You have to be schizophrenic for life.
Right.
That's probably the biggest challenge we have to face, and not
Right.
actually let that affect our normal behavior.
Right. Okay. So in Hollywood right now, you've heard like we are having like the writers' strike and all of that, and some of the studios have come out saying that they are planning to use AI to sort of write film scripts.
Yes.
Now, how far do you think India is from doing that? Do you think Indian filmmakers, especially indie filmmakers, are in trouble because of this sort of technology uh, moving towards a more uh, automated tech technology using AI to sort of make films, and it can be any aspect of films. Right now, the talk is just on writing aspect, but it could also be taking actors'
Actors.
faces and sort of using that, right?
Yeah.
So, what is your take on that?
Yes, it's something that's been causing sleepless nights to writers across the world. And it's not like in India, people haven't tried that. I've heard
Right,
that, at least in the advertising world, advertising scripts, they are trying AI because advertising scripts don't really need to have an author fingerprint. They're just written to maximize product visibility. So, yes, it's a matter of time before producers and studios try to circumvent writers because AI is fairly developed. But I don't know if that is not the natural progression of things. You know, even when
right,
cinema was invented 125 years ago, not more than that, there must have been a lot of hue and cry that theater is going to die, and uh, live performances are going to die, and we can't do this. We can't replace live performance and human interaction with recording for posterity. So there's always been pushback. It's human to push back against technology that will replace human beings. Now, when you look at the industrial revolution, it continues to replace manual labor. And trade unions over the last 200 years, 150 years, have been up in arms about being replaced by machines. So it is part for the course. As human beings, we are constantly going to upgrade technology. Technology is going to constantly replace human beings. What do human beings do? We innovate. We come up with new ways to make the medium so human dependent that you cannot keep up.
right,
Technology
right,
cannot keep up. Now, do we have a solution yet? No, not really. But I'm expecting that in the next 10, 20, 50, 25 years, something will come up and
right.
we'll arrive at a new medium. It won't be cinema as we know it anymore.
Okay. You've made 8 short films and 4 feature films at the moment. Fourth feature film being Joram.
Yeah.
So, and each of your film caters to a very niche audience, right? Each one of those films, they talk about topics, they talk about issues that people in our Indian society will never openly discuss, right? Nor would they want to watch a movie like that on the big screen, right? So how does this motivate you as a filmmaker to sort of continue telling such important, thought-provoking stories, and sort of push the boundaries of cinema to create that awareness and education, right?
Mm. Uh, Many answers to that one question. One, I am deep down, I am actually a political activist. If I had not chosen the medium of cinema, I might have been out there either doing activism on the streets or having started a political party to counter the hegemony of the fascist ruling party. I would have done something of that sort. But I realized very early on that I don't have those chops. I have the
Right,
chops of a storyteller or an artist. And there's so much rage inside, it was but natural that I would channel that into my chosen, what I call a weapon of choice. My weapon is not the protest placard uh, or a gun. My weapon of choice is my story. So I'm going to use that to the hilt. But number two, I don't. I mean, yes, my films end up being niche, but I don't intend them as niche. If you see Taandav, and I've made a comedy called Ilaichi, a
right,
short film, and even Joram. In fact, Joram has been an attempt to actually make a slightly massier film. It's a thrilling. It every minute something's happening in the film. It just doesn't let up. So I've tried to actually expand beyond the boundaries of niche and rein audiences in that wouldn't otherwise politically agree with me in a dinner table discussion. I try to entertain them or thrill them or just get them to sit up and feel something and then slide my politics in. Because I realized earlier on that today we live in a slightly more, actually much more woke and engaged and fertile and awake and active society than we did 20, 30
right,
years ago.
right,
Lines get drawn that much quicker. People have realized what their political stance is by the time they're teenagers. So I can't make divisive films in today's time. So I need to, even though I have a strong political voice, my storytelling and my choice of genre and tone needs to be inclusive, needs to be embracive, needs to be welcoming, so that dialogue can happen. So with every film, I'm trying to expand my audience set wider and wider and wider. So I hope
right.
my films are not niche and will sort of get watched more and more with every passing film. With Joram, that's been the hope and the attempt.
Right. So you have worked with uh, a wide range of very talented actors, right, in both short films and as well as the feature films. Some of the big names include Manoj Bajpayee, Abhishek Banerjee. I've seen him in few of your films. How easy or how hard was it to sort of convince them to act in your films? And did any of those films, did you write the script keeping them in mind?
No, I never write a script keeping anyone in mind. Also, it takes years for my films to get made, so I can't pin my hopes on one person. Like with Manoj, for example, the first time we met was for Bhonsle. I was already trying to make the film for 3.5 years before I met him. And it had started and stopped and started and stopped three, four times. And then I met him and I had never imagined him as Bhonsle. And then over the 2, 3 years that he and I had to take to set up the film together, because it was a difficult film to find funding for, I started rewriting it and reshaping it to sort of incorporate his personality, and he started working on it too. So it became collaborative after I met him. So it's a two-way thing. Now with the other actors, like my short films have Nimrat Kaur, who was in Lunchbox. They have Abhishek Banerjee. They have Rasika
Right.
Duggal, who became an OTT star. I worked with all these people before they became big. Like Abhishek was in a short film called Agli Baar back in 2015. And
Right.
then I cast him in Ajji as a villain, and then he got cast in Patal Lok, and things exploded for him.
Things are right.
So often it's really the actors that I find something interesting in, and we sort of find a great collaboration, and things open up for them. So the only person who was already a huge success before I worked with him was Manoj.
In a perfect world, if you could actually cast any actor you wanted, who would that be?
I'd use AI.
That
Honestly,
is a
I never
okay.
write for actors. I write from
Right,
my
right,
political page, and then whoever, I have a short list, and then whoever's willing and able and fits the budget, and is enthusiastic enough and aligns himself or herself with me, I run with it.
Okay. So in Taandav, right, it's a short film where Manoj Bajpayee plays the lead of a cop. You end the film with a quote that says, "Man is free the moment he wishes to be," right? And then towards the end of the film, we see Manoj Bajpayee sort of giving a wry smile when his family is sort of watching his dancing uh, antics on the internet, right? So did he actually feel like he was free at that moment, or was it all just a tamasha in his mind, right? As he was thinking his freedom is only temporary, right? Because his wife was sort of initially smiling and then she stopped smiling. It also resonated well with what you had mentioned in a previous interview before, that making short films actually still gives you a lot more freedom and control
Mm.
over the whole filmmaking process,
Yeah.
right?
And
And so maybe you can just expand on that a little bit.
no, it's beautiful that you connected those two dots. That quote in the film and the impulse to make a film like Taandav came from my driving, almost suicidal hunger to make something that I want to make. And it must have come, and now that you mention it, these things lie in the subconscious, no? And only the
Right,
audience, an engaged audience, catches the filmmaker subconscious, because we, while making it, we delve into what we feel deeply, but we don't know how much is lurking in our subconscious. So maybe those 10 years and all those films getting shelved, and so many people telling me how I should be doing that, what I should be doing. I had at least 1,000 people sit me down in those years and give me endless amounts of advice. That, you might be doing something wrong. Make a big film with a star. Sell your soul once, and then come back and do this. And you don't do it like this. You're too stuck up, and you're too angry. I'm like, yeah, okay, but just if I hadn't had 17 shelf films, would you still be saying these things to me? So
right,
somewhere all of that maybe came out in Taandav, because we tried to make Bhonsle, Manoj and me, and it didn't materialize. And then when I made 4 short films, it was him who told me that, why aren't we making a short together? And I'm like, wow, I didn't know that you'd want to make a short. And he had seen my shorts and he had a lot of faith. And I had this idea of this cop just exploding inside me for many years, because it was really me exploding. And it was my catharsis. So somewhere all these dots sort of join, and what that cop inside Tandav must be feeling at that point, I'm not really sure, because it's a mix of a lot of things. Yes, he did finally say fuck you to everybody and just danced with a gun in his hand, but at the same time he got suspended, and
right,
that little girl is not going to go to the school of his wife's choice. So he still has to grapple with those demons. So it's freedom for today, but he still has to grapple with tomorrow. And
right,
freedom is an inch by inch acquired thing. You don't get,
right,
you know eternal freedom all at once.
right. Takes time, right? So it
Yeah,
just sort
it
of
comes bit
grows.
by
Yep.
bit. What you have today, you might not have tomorrow.
So we as human beings, right? It doesn't matter where you live. We're sort of shackled by different systems that govern our lives, right? So you have like the law and order system, political, educational. In India, you have like the societal system, which has sort of some subsystems like the class system,
Yeah.
caste, race, all of that stuff, right? It sometimes get hard to sort of get away from these systems, but most people are happy sort of living their lives being controlled by these systems, right? But your films, Taandav, and even Dumpa, sorry, show people that who are trying to break free from these systems, and they're doing so in some cases out of frustration or just simply for the plain reason they just want to be happy, right? How did like these systems affect you as you embarked on your filmmaking career back in 2008, and also now that you have made 4 feature films? Do you think you have broken free of these systems, especially the ones governing the film industry?
No, as long, especially in today's time in India, when, like I said, the political lines are so strongly drawn, whether it's religion or caste or class, they're getting drawn deeper and deeper currently. And even if it wasn't the case, there is no way to escape this even within the industry, as long as you're choosing to tell stories that people actually don't want to hear. And even if I mean, yes, like I said, I sort of disguise them in the garb of accessibility, whether it's comedy or thrill or revenge. But ultimately, I'm saying certain things that I'm holding up a mirror, and the reflection is ugly. And most viewers don't want to look at that ugly reflection, because life in India and a lot of countries, not just India, is your daily life is really hard to get through it. And that the lower you go in the social hierarchy, it's that much harder to get through your daily life. So do you
Right.
really, when you're watching a film or reading a story or listening to a song, do you really want to be reminded every time of how dismal and difficult your life is? Maybe not. I
Maybe not.
understand the need for escape, but I have too much rage inside me to give anyone escape. Even if, like I said, the garb will be entertaining, inside it, I will catch you unawares and I'll shove that bitter pill down your throat, because that's now my mission for life. Otherwise, I will self destruct. I'm bothered by all these things constantly.
Right. And there are a lot of films that are made to sort of escape anyways, right?
Yes.
Uh,
Enough of
so
them.
there's way too many, I would say, especially since the pandemic, with all of the OTT streaming
Yeah.
platforms that are just crunching out films almost every week, right? Um, so let's talk about your new film, Joram. It is a film where a father is actually on the run with his baby girl uh, to sort of escape from his past, right? How did you come up with the idea for this film, and why is it important for you to sort of share this story?
So the politics of the tribal condition in India, and now that we've screened in Australia and Africa, it's, I mean, it was already evident to me that the indigenous across the world are facing pretty much the same issues for a few hundred years now. But what is different with India, vis-a-vis the aborigines in Australia or the indigenous Red Indians in America, is that here it's our own races, our own countrymen who are doing this to our own countrymen. It just,
Right.
it flummoxes me. I've traveled the tribal areas of Andhra Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and Orissa about 12, 13 years back. I'd gone there really. I was trying to tell stories around the situation from the things I had read, the things I had heard. And even after a lot of conversations with journalists who had been on the field, it didn't feel like enough. It was all intellectual, it was all information. And yes, you can fabricate stories with information and data, but I wanted to move people. I wanted to shake people up and make them think about these things that they choose to not think about. So I traveled. I went and experienced what I could firsthand. And whatever I saw and whatever I heard and whatever I lived through, I think gave me enough stories for the rest of my life. So I've been telling these stories for the last 13 years. My first film, Unga, which then I converted into a young adult novel that won a whole lot of awards. My short film that released with Cheepatakadumpa called Cycle. A lot of my short stories in my book, Forgetting, all these stories have to do with that situation of development, mining, and not giving the tribal their rights and forcibly evicting them from their land. So Joram was an attempt to try and tell this at a scale where I could reach, like I said, not niche audiences, the wider audiences, not as wide as a Shah Rukh Khan or Salman Khan audience, but much wider than any audience that my films have accessed so far. So that this conversation, which is not had enough, not had at all, in fact, can be had, because especially under this government now, nobody wants to have a counter development conversation. Everyone is being made to believe that roads and dams and rampant construction is the way forward, is the way to progress, and trees don't matter, tribal lives don't matter. So I'm just trying to ensure that conversations don't die. So this was the initial impetus, and Manoj Bajpayee standing alongside me and ensuring that a film like this get greenlit. And it took us years. Like Bhonsle took us 6, 7 years to get made. This he read in 2016, and only in 2021, when he had Family Man 2 behind him and he'd become this huge OTT star, that he could take this script to a Zee studio and say that, I want to do this with Dave. And the studio came in. And a studio that big would have been inaccessible for a filmmaker like me otherwise.
Right. So
So
that
you
was,
have to
yeah. So,
you have to take it that far and that wide at a certain scale,
right.
those conversations.
So that was my next question. And so compared to previous feature films, Zee Studios is backing you for Joram, right? So how does I know you just mentioned like Manoj Bajpayee sir helped you with sort of taking the film there, but how did the collaboration with Zee Studios transpire as opposed to, let's say, Geo Studios or some of the other big studios in India? And what are some of the lessons that you've learned working with one of the biggest studios in India?
Now, the interesting thing about Zee Studio is that it's a distribution studio first. And one of the biggest challenges of independent filmmaking in India and the world is that when you're trying to make maybe that first independent film, you take loans, you sell everything you own, you murder somebody, you rob a bank, you know how to make it. You somehow make that film, but you don't know what to do with it once it's made. The biggest challenge we face is distribution. So suddenly, here was a studio that aces its distribution. It's distributed all kinds of films for decades. Now, I knew that that part of the pipeline is covered, and I've never been in that situation in my life because I make a film,
Right.
then I don't know when and how it will get out there. If it gets out there, will it reach an intended audience? If it reaches the audience, will the audience even watch it completely? You don't know the answers to those questions. Here, suddenly, I had the answers to those questions, but I needed to recalibrate what I'm making,
Right.
because these studios going to get me that kind of access. I actually can't then make such a niche film that it sort of makes Z Studio question why they backed a film like this in the first place. So it was a collaborative creature after it got greenlit. I went into rewrites while we were setting up the film, and we sort of consciously, and I'm asked if that was a compromise, and I call it a recalibration. I always work backwards from the opportunities and the pieces that I have before me. Now I had Z Studio and I had Manoj Bajpayee and I had distribution. So I'm obviously
Right.
going to calibrate what I'm making. I'm going to try and see how can I maximize this, because also every film I've made takes me 3 to 4 years to set up. And I've been in Bombay now 20 years. I've had 17 shelf films. I don't have the luxury of waiting 4 to 5 years to set up each film. So I need every film to open up doors for me once it's made. So that was one of the biggest learning curves that I went on with this film. How to
Right.
access, how to sort of work into my
Yeah.
script and film that sense of scale.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, I think one of the hardest pieces of uh, making an independent film and sort of making sure that it reaches as wide an audience as possible, right? So that is one of the biggest challenges, right? And so, what is your opinion on the state of independent cinema in India today? Uh, Especially since the pandemic, we have had in sometimes way too many films coming out that people don't even have the time to sit and watch commercial films, right? And then and so just want to know what your take is. How does that affect independent cinema? And do you think India is actually doing a very good job in sort of promoting young indie filmmakers? And um, yeah, just your overall take on that.
It's a complex answer. I don't have any simple answers to that. There are many facets to this. Firstly, Indian cinema compared to any other country's cinema is not just one cinema. It is 28
Right.
regional cinemas plus Hindi cinema. So, and every regional cinema is almost like an individual, independent entity that has its own cultural and uh, you know uh, artistic quirks. Like you cannot compare the independent voice or texture of a Marathi film with an Assamese or a Malayalam film. They are so different that they could very well have been made in different countries. So, given that very exciting heterogeneity, how does one country actually know what to do with all these cinemas? So that's where we actually hit roadblocks. And that's always been the case because in the past, Malayalam cinema has been sort of buffered from Hindi cinema. Hindi cinema audiences have not been able to access Malayalam cinema. For example, like you yourself, you had to go to video parlors to see what foreign films are there. Now the regional films from India won't even make it to the Hindi speaking audience until the online YouTube and then OTT boom happened. So the positive side is that suddenly you have access. And so when you have access, of course you will have more than you can watch. Because suddenly
Right.
now you can watch all these 28 different languages, where earlier you were only watching one language sitting in the Hindi mainstream. So the downside to that is now there's a glut and you can't choose. But I see that as a temporary positive that yes, now you at least have the access. Now it's up to you to, as a viewer, to find and hunt down the good cinema. Now, the downside to that is how many people have the stamina to do that. Then it
Right.
comes to the budgets. Like even if my film Ajji was on Netflix, a Netflix will not spend a single paisa putting any algorithms to make Ajji visible because nobody wants to watch Ajji. People want to watch the last big blockbuster like an RRR. So they will put money in the algorithms to push RRR onto your feed. So Ajji
Right.
will not come on your feed. You will not even know Ajji exists. So there are those downsides, but there are those upsides too. Then now you have access. You don't need to go to that film festival once a year to watch those two regional films that you would otherwise not get to watch. They're out
Right.
there, you can access.
Right.
So it's a very tricky conversation.
Tricky. Yeah. Um, yeah. It's just that when you have so many films to choose from, and then out of that one is an independent film, like what is the likelihood that you would want to watch that independent film as opposed to maybe four or five other
Yeah.
commercial blockbusters or something of that sort?
And
It sort of depends, right?
look at
So
the flip side. Till 10 years back, that independent film didn't even enter your set of
enter, right,
choices.
right.
At least
Okay,
it's
yeah,
there and you're choosing to
there,
not.
right. Who are some of the directors from Indian and world cinema who sort of influenced you through your filmmaking career?
So, like I said, I've never been a film buff. And even today, like if you ask me, if I've watched RRR or Pathan or Jawan or 10 other independent Indian films, I'll have not watched any of them because I watch about 10 films a year. I really curate my list. I watch them slowly. I watch them in pieces, like reading a book. I'm a very different film watcher. I don't enjoy watching films in theaters. I like taking a film apart and really trying to know what worked in it for me or what didn't. So film watching has not really been a big part of my shaping of my artistic voice. I don't really have influences. Maybe I do, but I won't be able to pinpoint them because I've not watched any filmmaker's entire filmography either. Like a Kislowski, the few films I've watched of his have had a profound impact on me, but I've not watched them again and again or watched all his films to say that he's influenced me, for example. So it's really art and graphic novels and music. Those have been
Right,
my influences. Like if when like I went to Cannes in 2018, I spent all of 3 days in the festival, but I spent 4 days in Paris, of which 2 days I was in the Louvre. I just couldn't leave the Louvre.
right.
Those are my influences.
For any young indie filmmakers out there, what is the biggest advice that you can give them right now?
I generally, again, I don't like giving advice because when I was given advice, I should never listen. And
Right,
advice, it is a double-edged sword because sometimes you're a little lost. Like I know I was for many years, and you think you're not doing the right things, which is why you're facing failure again and again. And you're hoping that someone will tell you that one magical thing that will just unlock the mysteries for you. But 9 out of 10 times, that one magical thing would have worked like magic for the person giving you that piece of advice. And there's a remote chance, or maybe not at all, that that will work for you. And you actually take it seriously and you implement it, and you're like, dude, you told me it'll work for me, and it didn't. So the only advice I actually give is that don't take advice. Learn from your mistakes. If there's something you want to do, whether it's singing songs all your life or making films, just start doing it right now. Don't wait for the right moment. I'll give a little anecdote here. I might have gotten the facts a bit wrong because it's a second, third hand anecdote and it's from many years ago. So Stanley Kubrick, back in the 70s, was the god of the artistic independent cinema in America. And every student of film wanted to listen to Stanley Kubrick and what made him and why he makes the choices he makes, and they wanted Stanley Kubrick's advice. So finally, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he got fried and he finally told the New York Film School, you know what, I'll come. So I'll just give that one meeting to all your students. Whoever wants to be there better be in that hall that one time. So he comes, and word has spread like wildfire. And I think some 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 batches of students, thousands of students packed into that one hall to listen to Kubrick. Kubrick walks on stage and he says, "How many of you here want to make a film and haven't made a film yet?" And all hands shoot up. And he says, "Pick up a camera, go shoot your film." And he leaves.
Mhm.
That's all he had to
Yeah,
say.
yeah. That's actually pretty good advice, right?
Yeah, just keep doing. You'll make one
Yeah,
bad film, you'll make two bad films, you'll learn from your
exactly.
mistake.
Yep, yep.
It'll be your journey.
Um, if you could go back in time to when you started making films, is there anything that you would change or do differently?
Fuck, that's a very triggering question because, like I said, those 10, 12 years that my films weren't getting made. And now, when I'm suddenly on the cusp of being recognized for my films, because even Ajji and Bhonsle had a very niche audience. It's Joram that's actually started expanding my audience and is traveling wider than my earlier films did. I'm in my 40s. I expected this to happen to me in my late 20s because when I first heard of Shyamalan and Sixth Sense, and I saw Sixth Sense and it blew my mind. And I realized he was 29 when he made it. I'm like, okay, I can make my first insanely good film at the age of 29 if Shyamalan could do it. I'm in my 40s and my films are just starting to get recognized. So if I could go back and change something, I'd probably not come to filmmaking at all.
Okay, I did not expect that response, to be honest. So,
I'd stick to writing because I think I'm a pretty compelling prose writer, but in my this endless quest to make my films and all these years of failure, not failure, but thwarted attempts, I never gave time to my prose writing. And the one novel I wrote, I won the two top awards that year for young adult fiction. So maybe I would be sitting on 10 novels right now. Maybe I'd have won a Booker. I don't know. So I
okay.
may not have come here at all.
Right. So Devashish, that's all the questions I have for you right now. And so I just want to say I really appreciate taking the time to sort of do this interview with us. And I wish you all the luck and all the love of everyone
Thank you.
at Talking Films for your new film as well as your filmmaking career.
Okay.
Okay, Devashish.
Okay.
Thank you.
This was lovely.
Yeah.
Thank
Yep. Bye bye.
you. Bye.